Welcome to the Raven Knoll Show. I'm your host, Raven C. Knoll, known as a soul physician. I'm a wife, mother, counselor, mindset plus life coach, and speaker, and this is episode number 17. Hey, RCM Pod Squad, we are back, and I am excited to bring to you yet another interview. Today, I'm going to be sharing my interview with Aaja Corinne, who I adore. She is one of my favorite people, y'all. I really do adore Aaja. What I love about Aaja is her influence in business is actually online and offline, kind of similar to mine. And I wanted to interview Aaja because I believe she gives a unique perspective of what an influencer is. And so Aaja is an inspirational voice of the millennial generation. She's inspiring hope, activating purpose, creating change, and empowering visionaries for success in the marketplace. She's a graduate of Joseph Business School in Columbia, Chicago, and has more than a decade of professional experience in the fashion, beauty, and communication industries. As a Chicago-based branding strategist, messaging specialist, and speaker, she helps purpose-driven entrepreneurs and leaders to become the undeniable choice. She has her own podcast called Purpose Potential, also her own mentorship called Purpose Potential, and she just provides resources designed to help women of faith with marketplace callings to achieve a competitive edge by God's design. Aaja is an online engagement pastor as well at Cutting Edge Global. She wears all the hats. She does all the things. So let's get to it. Hey, Aaja, how are you?
Raven, I am doing really well. How are you?
I am doing fantastic. So excited to have you on the show today.
Thank you for having me. You are the bomb. So it is an honor to be here.
Awesome. Well, I know that, you have an online presence and you have for some years now. I know that you've been in the online space, online and offline. I don't know who hasn't worked with Aaja. I've worked with you, and I know that you are pretty much plugged in online and offline. And so your business isn't just like a solely online presence. And so, but you'll still be considered an influencer in your field as a brand strategist and someone who does show up online. So let us know, how do you feel about having an online presence? How does that feel to you? What's your perspective behind that?
Yeah, it's interesting because the first thing that came to mind is how I'm hearing a lot of influencers say, like, I'm doing everything I can online to, strike my chord, hit my moment, and then disappear. And for me, I think online is good when used in its proper context. I think that it can become a monster. You don't have the right perspective about why you're there. So for me, online is a tool to give God glory by living my life out loud and living in full expression. I believe that how I show up online in a lot of ways proves my platform and proves what it is that I work to support people with. So it's a reinforcement tool for me, but I understand why I'm there. I have what I would call a business casual account. And shout out to my friend Brittany Applegate, like some years ago, 8-9 years ago, we sat down and we termed that for kind of like thought leaders, people who don't have a personal and a business, but you kind of use one account for both personal and professional, but it all works together. And so I am there personally, but what I do personally there serves me professionally. So I think it's a good tool because I have been able to manage how I use it.
I think something that you said that's really important is that sometimes people lose sight of the purpose, right? Yeah. We start to think that we have this online presence and the reason behind it and the why behind it and how we can utilize it as an actual tool to, like you said, prove and kind of give like a resume of who you are. You get lost in all this other stuff where it's like, well, who's doing this and who's doing that. And it kind of starts to make your whole vision for who you are and yourself start to change and transform. And I know specifically you're a brand strategist. So have you seen this with like other people, how, they've shown up online, but then you've worked with them and they start to shift and change and different things of that nature and things kind of get off track for them. Have you seen that happen before?
Absolutely. Yeah. I see it happening as early as yesterday. And we are going to give out what we put in.
Yeah.
And so I recommend that when anybody is in a time where they need to create from a pure place, they kind of disconnect themselves from so much input in that regard. I mean, you need to be inputting the word of God, inputting things, related to what you need. But as far as studying other people and how they're doing things and their offers, I mean, because the reality is that somebody else's mix, how they show up in their approach is not necessarily going to produce the same results for you, nor does it work for you, because how they show up is aligned with their it factors and their likability factors. And so, sometimes we study other people, but it's not really to our advantage, because if we are taking cues from our peers, we can only be number two. Never be number one when we're just studying the person that we feel like is in front of us. And so, yes, I see that very often. And going back to that piece we were talking about offline, just about identity, I believe that it takes a knowing of who you really are, of course, to show up in the online space authentically, but to counter a lot of the messages that you are, receiving day in and day out that may make you want to sway one way or the other that's not your authentic self.
I love that you said that. I know that we kind of talked offline a little bit about identity and how important that is, but you particularly wear many hats, right? You are a mother, you have a business side of you, you have a ministry side of you as well. And like you're an online engagement pastor, and having all those different hats and being a woman that people will look at and say, oh man, that's a quality woman. That's a woman with great quality, or the caliber of woman that you are. What challenges that are most people not aware of that a person of your caliber may struggle with mentally or emotionally?
Yeah, that's a great question. First, thank you. It's that people like us, you and I, like we're not on all the time.
Yeah.
But there's an expectation to be on all the time. It's an expectation for there to be a constant outpouring, which makes you have to, understanding that there is an expectation for you to be in a constant pour. You have to govern yourself in a schedule in a way where you are always being poured into. Like you cannot let yourself run dry, because then all of a sudden you're no longer filling up the mold or the expectations that other people have of you. But not on all the time. Sometimes can be distracted. Sometimes can be unfocused. Sometimes don't know what God is saying about the season, this particular season of our life. And I believe that I am fully myself on social media. I don't believe that I am nobody that I'm not, but it still is a curated narrative. You can only tell so much, and you choose to share what you believe will be most valuable for people, but that does not mean that there's not a story going on behind the scenes. So I can be completely myself online, but there still be an underlying story that is forming and is also influencing the narrative that's online. So we are not on all the time. We are not invincible, perfect beings. That is something that people need to know.
I think it's so good that you said that. People have this expectation that we're always on, right? That at all times, because you see the front facing person, you see the person that shows up online and the pictures look nice and the quotes are really taken care of and everything is pretty aligned. But like you said too, it's still kind of a curated experience in a sense, because we still want to be able to produce and say that, hey, here's our resume of who we are, and we want to attract clients. So in all, there has to be a way that you do that, but at the same time, not show up as something that you're not, or a person that you're not. And I think that people kind of get those two things mixed up. Why do you feel like so many people take the humanity out of a person that may be influential, or a person that may be an expert at what they do, or a person that shows up front facing? Why do they take that humanity portion out and almost feel like we're super women that show up and, we don't have no struggles. There's nothing going on behind the scenes. Why do you think people do that?
I think it is because of the curated narrative that we present. It feels so perfect. It feels so polished, and how people perceive you is directly proportioned to your messaging and the content that you share. So if you are only sharing things that are kind of curated and perfect, and your makeup is always done and your hair is always done, the brain resonates. Their hair is always perfect. Their makeup is always done. Not, oh, she got up this morning and the hair was all over here. Right. So it is partially because of how we present ourselves that is the only persona that they're engaging with. And in a lot of capacities, these people that are engaging with you online have not met you in person. And so that's all they have to go off of. And so I don't really know. You don't want to stop presenting yourself in the best light because, as you commented, like it is important for you professionally to be perceived in a certain way, to unlock certain opportunities, to position yourself, in a certain way as it relates to your field and your expertise. But it does cause people to look at you as larger than life when really you're a real person with great presentation.
Yeah. I think that's really, really powerful. And then it makes me also think about, because there's so much, I guess you can say, pressure to be able to produce content that is on a certain level or, has certain expectations there. How does that pressure to produce online and within your personal business aid in some of those struggles that you may have deal with outside of the context of social media, behind the scenes? Some of the things that you as a woman have to face that people don't necessarily see you face. How do those things aid in that?
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting question, because the first thing that came to mind for me is that I feel like my content is a good balance of production and not overproduction or not being overproduced. And I think that's important because whatever you do has to be sustainable.
Yeah.
And so, like, I know I'm no graphic designer, I'm no videographer. And so I feel like my audience has developed a liking for my best non-produced content.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's like one big kind of mood board is the approach that I take to sharing. But there are others who have really raised the production standards of their platform. So if they tried an approach like me, it'd be like, wait, what are you doing? So I think everybody has to develop the personal standard for their brands. And I will say that just because my content is not overly produced or it's not, professional production, I'll say that. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean that it's not excellent. It doesn't mean it's not telling a good story. It's just the tone that I have, chosen to share. And so everybody has to find their place. Like, what really works for you? I will say that professionally produced content, it definitely does communicate a degree of polish, but I have really been noticing a shift in online engagement where people want more real. What I have noticed is that the standards for the everyday person just keeps getting higher and higher and higher. We have no birthday announcements without photo shoots. Mm-hmm. We have no baby announcements without full productions. And I'm not just talking about for the influencer. Now, this is the standard for the everyday person. We don't have a birthday without a birthday graphic with the Cash App handle on the bottom. Like, what this is the standard for everybody. And just kind of bringing that example to fashion, I studied fashion in college. Fashion is a series of trends. And one thing that we learned is before the millennium, fashion operated in 40-year rotations. So the silhouette of the 20s was the silhouette of the 60s and the 30s and the 70s, up until we got into the new millennium where social media really started to dictate trends, and it was no longer controlled by like a very centralized kind of fashion government. But whenever the skirts would get completely high, couldn't get no shorter, the next season they would be as long as they could get. Yeah. And so the reason why I shared that is because now our standards are getting so high that now nobody is reacting to that overly polished, professionally produced content. Now people are reacting to what you recording on your phone in your house, looking crazy, because like we have gotten numb.
Yeah.
Everybody now having that as a standard. Now everybody can use the app on their phone and do that. Now, what is going to be disruptive? And really, engagement is driven by that which is disruptive.
Yeah, I love that you said that. It's so true when you do think about trends in like fashion or trends in general and interior design, trends and just in that industry in general, they're ever changing. So as soon as you get accustomed to one thing, something else does produce itself. And I think that all in all, because we are also in like a time and a generation where people are putting a lot of emphasis on mental health and like emotional health, and seeing those curated platforms and social media posts all the time can get exhausting. And I think people are like, I just want something real to tell me that life is okay.
Yes. Life is okay. In chicken scratch. Life is okay.
Absolutely. But with the trends always changing and the market always changing, whether that's in business or social media, do you feel like at any point in your career or in your business that you started to kind of buy into those trends where you kind of separated yourself from the authenticity of who you are and really start to plug into someone you did not necessarily like? Have you ever felt that way?
Honestly, not so much. I
Okay.
do remember a time in 2017 where I was trying to find my footing. This was in my early years of being a full-time entrepreneur. And I remember watching my industry so closely and the shifts that they were making, but more so from a business model and delivery and approach perspective, less about a content perspective. So I haven't really given in to the pressures of whatever content trends I saw, but directionally, I was saying that if this is where my industry is going, this is where I need to go, until I realized that my difference was actually the exact opposite of that. And that's where I really thrived and shown the most. But I just believe I've kind of always been that person that's been a little bit in my own world. And I'm really not so much in tune with a lot of like all the twists and turns. I have people in my network that I go to and I follow if I want to know what the update is, but I'm not necessarily the person that is going and seeking it out, and staying on top of it myself. So I will say that that's not really a challenge that I've had. And it just, I guess, to kind of validate that a little bit, one of the things that people have continuously said about me over the years is like, you've been the same person. Like, you've been extremely consistent. I think that's something my audience really values from me, that even in evolution, I still carry the DNA of my beginning.
Yeah, love that. Love that. Love that. I think that that's something powerful, and it almost debunks a myth that sometimes we think, or people look at us and they're like, oh, well, they must be buying into all these different, that's the only way that you can remain relevant in a sense, right? You have to be buying into all these different trends and what's happening over here and what's happening over there. And you got to have your hands in this platform and that platform and that platform. And I think it just debunks a lot of those myths that people think just because you're an influencer that you start to buy into what's popular or what's celebrated. But God really makes a difference. I really believe when you have a strong relationship with the Lord and you're really bought into him and his way, you don't have to follow these trends. You follow the way in which God has led you. And if he tells you follow a trend, you follow a trend. But if he tells you not, then
Yeah.
so.
I wholeheartedly agree with that. I think that the reason why any influencer is trying to shift and follow trends is because it's like, how do I keep my engagement up? And how do I keep people watching? And my money is dependent upon brands buying in, and they want to see numbers, they want to see engagement. But for me, I kind of classify myself as socially active, but I have an offline business. So I do not have an online business. My business flows and my money works without online, but I think online is less about my business and more about my platform and my thought leadership going further, which does draw a line to my business, but honestly, not as much as other things that are going on. I believe my online activity keeps me tip of tongue and top of mind. And I believe that my online presence serves as a source of inspiration for people. And so for those reasons, even if it didn't have a direct parallel to, the financial success of my business, I would continue on because I think that is the most important, God's name being glorified and people understanding what it really looks like to live a relevant life that doesn't compromise their relationship with God.
I love that. That was like a gem that just dropped, right? Like living a relevant life that does not compromise your relationship with God. That's something I think we all need to reflect on, especially those that are really in an online presence, because you can get so distracted by everything else that you kind of buy into, again, what's popular. And so I love that you said that. I love that you said that. Well, Aaja, go ahead.
Before that, I just want to further on the term relevant, because I feel like some people may be like, what does it mean relevant? What I mean by relevant is that I am very much church and I am very much in my industry. I'm very much wherever I need to be. I am not restricted to one environment. I can absolutely function in other environments and my faith still be evident from, how I carry myself and how I move. And so by relevant, I mean us as believers, if the audience is believers, but making an impact beyond just our impact and interactions with one another. I can function and I can be distinct, but I don't have to be weird. And I can still be cool, and I can still have style, and I can live a relevant life without compromising my walk with God.
I love that you made that plain for us. So in your perspective, when you put it that way, what do you feel like the cost is of relevancy and influence?
Yeah, that's interesting. What is the cost between relevancy and influence? You have to know your limits.
Yeah.
You have to know what you're not willing to do just to get a little bit more attention or get a bigger audience. I think that I have this kind of saying that influence is a responsibility that calls for servant leadership. When God platforms you, you still have to hear.
Yeah.
When he increases you in number, you still have to know your source, where you're taking directions and where you're taking cues from. And also just the sobering mindset that God is your relevance. Like literally, the advantage that the Holy Spirit provides you is what causes you to have relevance when he platforms you, and that platform is for his purposes and his agenda and not your own. And so I think that there can, come to you a lot of temptations and, external pressures and a lot of opportunities to compromise when you get platformed. But you have to remember, you're not being platformed for your purposes and to serve yourself. And so many have fallen by not keeping that perspective in mind. But for those that are called of God, understanding that promotion comes from the Lord, that's definitely something that we always have to keep top of mind.
Yes, yes, yes. Promotion comes from the Lord. And when we are platformed, it is not for our own glory, but for the glory of God. Mm-hmm. I love that. I think this is a fantastic way to wrap up the interview today. Thank you. Thank you, Aaja. Thank you for coming.
So good. Thank you, Raven. I appreciate you.
This has been the Raven Knoll Show. Thanks for listening. If you haven't yet, please subscribe to this podcast so you're the first to know when new episodes are released. And don't forget to leave a review. If you can't wait until the next show, follow along on Instagram, YouTube, or Twitter at Raven C. Knoll for more tips and to keep the conversation going. Go ahead and DM me on Instagram or take a screenshot of this podcast and share it to your IG stories. I want to know about your takeaways from the show. Don't forget to tag me and use the hashtag RCNPodSquad. Lastly, visit my website at ravencnoll.com and join my email list to get exclusive bonuses only for my email subscribers. Thanks again for rocking and rolling with me. I'll talk to you soon.